Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, it's Maiden, so back to Card by Vanguard deck profile. So if you guys enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also shall we. This time we're covering set 12 for Stoicheia Lianorn. Now, to be clear, this is not Lianorn Masquez, this is just pure regular Lianorn without the Masquez. Pretty much what this deck was supposed to be is just me getting away from the Masquez in preparation for whatever the hell new Lianorn's gonna do. So that's pretty much what this deck is for. But because we didn't really have many good cards I wanted to pick from that were Masquez based, we pretty much just stuck with the old, I think it was set 7 Lianorn build, but then just shoved in 2 new cards. So let's see what we got, shall we? First of the day, we have our starter in Announcing Wind of Spring. Cold Fee, Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 6k base. Auto rule upon 1 second draw card. Standard starter, that's just a free draw if you go second. None of the rider line really requires Core Fee, but if she fits the theme, so might as well go for Core Fee as the starter. Then we have our triggers, so we run the Over Trigger and Source Dragon Deity of Blessings, Blessfavor. Grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power. Over Trigger, you have one Over Trigger in your deck. When revealed as a trigger, move that card, draw a card, choose one of your units, it gets +1 for the turn. And if you revealed it during a jet check, activate its additional effect, which you can draw a card, choose one of your units, it gets +1 critical for the turn. All your form gets plus 10k power for the turn. If your damage on the same number of cards your opponents are more, you can choose a card from your damage on to heal it. So pretty much in everything bagel, and I think I've made this pretty clear at this point, this is one of my favorite overs, if not my favorite over outright, just because it's literally in everything bagel. Like, you guaranteed to get the 1 million in a draw regardless if you drive check it or damage check it, but if you drive check it, on top of that 1 million in a draw, you get another draw, so you get 2 draws, your front row gets plus 10, along with someone getting 1 million, someone gets a crit, probably the Vanguard, or the thing you gave the 1 million to, depending, and you possibly get to heal on top of that. Blessfavor is all around just a very good over, and I like Blessfavor for that reason alone. And honestly, you can run the other ones like Hysphoria for resource management, or what's it called, Valnut for multi-attack, but I will take Blessfavor over any day of the week because everything bagel. Blessfavor doesn't necessarily guarantee you the win, but it makes it a lot harder to beat you, I'll tell you that much. So one of Blessfavor. Then we have our normal triggers. First, we run 2 copies of Frenzied Heiress. Grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k base. Continuous guard circle. Opponent's Vanguard to grade 3 or plus 5k shield. You know, it's a front trigger. It's nice to add a little bit of numbers to front row because, especially since we're not playing Masquez, the front row doesn't really have a lot of pressure when we get down to the final attacks thanks to Resonance Dragon. So it's nice to have the front trigger there for numbers, but it's also nice to have it there for extra shield. Also, the thing that I run Frenzied Heiress for is because whenever I seem to need Frenzied Heiress to show up, she'll show up. Like, if I'm gambling on seeing a front, I can probably take that gamble, and more, like 9 times out of 10, she'll show up. So, 2 of Frenzied Heiress. I don't really have a reason not to run her, because like I said, if I want her to show up, she pretty much does. And honestly, most of the times, that's when I need to win. So, 2 of Frenzied Heiress. Very good front trigger. It's a 20k shield, and it adds numbers to the front row for a little bit more pressure. What's not to like about it? Then we have 2 draws in Serene, Maiden, and Lena. Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 4k base. I swear this thing is at 4. I could swear it's at 4 every time I play this deck, because I see draws way too often, but apparently I only run 2, which is something I refuse to believe. Continues guard, so components Vanguard to grade 3 or Garrus with 5k shield, which is nice to have. You know, it's the same thing as Frenzied Heiress. 10k shield, it's also a draw trick, so hopes to increase the hand, and this deck wants to go aggro early as soon as possible, so, you know, when you eventually throw down your entire hand, you're probably going to need something to repopulate it, especially if your opponent's playing something that board nukes you. Ahem, Gandiva, Eugene, anything for Dragon Empire, really. So being able to draw a card is nice to have from Lena. Again, I see Lena enough to where I'm starting to believe I run 4 copies of her, or more than 2, but quite literally, I check every single time of how many Lenas I have, and accordingly, there is only 2 of them, so I don't know what to say about it, but hey, that's what we got. Then move on to our crits. First, we run 3 copies of Melody of Pomaria. Grades of boost, 15k shield, 5k power. This can really be any crit you want that's a vanilla. I just chose to run this one because it fits the theme, and also he's so cute, little fireball. So we have 3 of Melodia. Then we have 4 copies of Aspiring Maiden Alana. Grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k base. Critical trigger, auto rear guard at the end of battle. This unit boosted. Put this unit to solo to choose one of these. It gets plus 2k for the turn. Okay, the 2k does nothing. You don't run this for the 2k. You rarely run these for the 2k. I can think of like 1 to 3 times about how often the 2k in general from any cards that had that skill came down to be useful. But the real reason you run this is for the soul aspect, because if you play this deck as aggressively as physically possible, your first grade 3 turn is probably going to be the last turn you have access to soul for whatever reason that may be. So, or like unless you Persona Ride and or use something to soul charge. So Alana here basically being able to counteract that in soul charge, and also being guard fodder, because then you can call it via Rectina and benefit from it and not lose soul out of it, is all around pretty solid. So long as it's a very solid crit, you know, right, to run 7 crits in a triple drive based deck for that extra pressure, but also in the sense of it can send itself to soul and make the deck a little bit more consistent. So 4 of Alana. Then we have 4 copies of Flowery Tone, 8k for me, whatever the heal trigger from Zorga was called. For some reason I can't think of it now. Elegy Pixie, there we go, yeah, Elegy Pixie. For some reason I see this as Elegy Pixie, because for those of you that don't know, when I first put Lianorn into tabletop, I had put Flowery Tone as the heal trigger, but I copied over Zorga's deck, and I forgot to change the name of LG Pixie to Flowery Tone. So pretty much every single time I drove check Flowery Tone, I said LG Pixie, and I think that was even present in my first deck profile when I accidentally called Flowery Tone LG Pixie. Anyways, Grizzo boost fitting a shield 5k power. It's a standard heal. I don't really like the effectives too much. I'd rather have a consistent 15k shield over the fluctuating 10 to 25. So if you want to run the effectives, go ahead, but I prefer Flowery Tone just because it's a consistent 15k shield. And then move on to our grade 1s. First, we're on 2 copies of Orderly Maiden Yolanda. Pretty much a card that only got in here for the simple reasons of testing, and I have used only once so far. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Auto rear guard, when this unit boosts, retire 2 other grade 1 less rear guards to draw a card, and she'll get plus 10k power to battle. All around is not a bad skill. Like, this deck can make a board pretty easily, so being able to kill 2 rear guards, especially if you know they're going to die next turn, because again, maybe you're playing against something like Eugene or Gandiva, or pretty much like anything that's going to nuke your board or get rid of it in some way, shape, or form. Before they get rid of it, you can get rid of it on your own terms to increase her numbers to 18k and get a draw out of it. The only downside is it's only when she boosts. I really wish it was when she boosts or when she attacks, because the deck has a lot of good boosters. What we really need is another attacker, but it's an 18k booster. I'm not going to say no to an 18k booster. So again, being able to kill targets and get a draw is nice, so it benefits well against board nuke decks, and that's pretty much the only real reason why Yolanda's here. But worst case scenario today, can take 18k booster, so there's something to like about it. 2 of Yolanda. And then we have 3 copies of Lively Rhythm Biara, grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Okay, so I'm starting to remember, as I built this deck, I remembered which Biara was the most important, because I took out 1, and apparently I stopped seeing my Biara so much more often. I'm starting to believe that that was the Biara that kept showing up. Anyways, auto rear guard, when the attack this unit booster hits a Vanguard, by putting a grade 2 or less card from your hand to your soul, draw a card. Cool. I remember there have been games where I've had 2 Biaras in my back rear guard circles, so basically every single attack was on hit, I get a benefit. So all around solid. It does help mitigate the soul problem of the deck, being able to pull a grade 2 or less. There are times where I've ended up with all triggers, PGs, and grade 3s in hand, so it was a choice of, do I want a soul charge of trigger, or do I not want a soul charge of trigger? In the end, I did, and I don't regret those decisions, because those led me to sack the over defensively. Either way, though, being able to send cards to soul is pretty nice, because again, it makes Lianorn a lot more cost consistent, but also the fact it replaces the card you sent to soul by giving you a free draw on top of that. So all around, Biara's a very good grade 1, it adds on hit pressure. If it does hit, it gets soul, and it gets drawn because it can restand due to Lianorn. That guarantees at least 2 attacks a turn will have on hit pressure, so that's nice to have. 3 of Biara, very solid grade 1. And then we have 4 copies of a card that I wanted to run for so long because it has a bow and nothing. Okay, to be fair, it does look cool, but mainly because it has a bow, and I couldn't because it was a promo, and I don't like to run promos until they have English art. And now that it has an English art, I run this as a 4-of, and I enjoy it every single second I get to play it. 4's Protecting Hunter, Prosper. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Auto when placed on rear guard by a card ability, you may soul charge 1. Okay, so that's an amazing ability regardless of how we look at this. They could have just stopped here, and honestly, this would be at least a 2-of in this deck. Here's why. Card, but when placed by card's ability, doesn't matter who it is, Vanguard, rear guard, whatever. Lianorn calls by card's ability. Rectina, the grade 2 of the ride line calls by card's ability. Our next grade 1, which is also very important to this deck's playstyle, calls by card ability. So all around, basically being able to be called by any 3 factors is amazing, especially because of the fact that 2 of them call from drop, meaning this thing acts as discard fodder, and it's a free soul charge, but non-mandatory. So if you're afraid you're going to deck out because you're going to keep triple driving every turn, you don't have to soul charge, especially if you have plenty of soul already. But if you don't have plenty of soul, so the early turns of the match, you can then use that soul charge ability. Pretty solid for that reason alone. And then its other ability, which is why I love running it, is auto rear guard circle. When this unit boosts anything, Vanguard, rear guard, doesn't matter. If your Vanguard has Lianorn in its card name, choose a unit in the same column as unit, it gets plus 5k power for the turn. Now, normally, you pick the thing in front of it, but something I realized the last time I played this deck against my friend, which was I think like 2 days ago. By the way, it's Wednesday, August 9th. Oh wait, no, then it wasn't 2 days ago. It was 3 days ago on Sunday. But pretty much what I learned is that it chooses any unit in the same column, including himself. Meaning this thing can be a 13k booster, and then when it stands, it's an 18k. If you want to give it to it twice. You don't do that if you have Resonance Dragon on your board, but you do it if you don't. So, Prosper is just all around a very solid grade 1. It can make itself get more numbers just by boosting. It's a non-mandatory free soul charge that works really well with this deck consistently. And it has a bow. That's not the most important fact to normal people, but to me it is the most important fact. So that's an easy 4 of, and I can see no reason not to run it as a 4 of considering both of its skills are free. Take that as you will, I'm going to die on the hill of free 4 of. And then we have 4 copies of the card I said combos well with this. 4 copies of Performing Petal Diantha. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto when she's placed on rear guard from the hand if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard. Counter bias when to choose a grade 3 or less from your drop zone and call it to rear guard. Okay, so Resonance Dragon, sometimes it's called fighting, sometimes called Resonance Dragon from this. But if you don't call Resonance Dragon, your first target, if it's available, should be this. It just should be, because free 5k for boosting and possible free soul charge. And then on top of that, then it's this one, and then after that, then it's this one, then after that, it's this one. So, like, you kind of have your whole thing decided for you. Either way, though, Diantha being able to call literally anything from drop is amazing, and then continues rear guard during your turn. If you have 2 or more back row grade 1 rear or less rear guards, she gets 5k power, so 13k if you have literally any other grade 1 in the back row, which is nice to have. But then also in the sense of she can call herself from this ability. Granted, it won't trigger it because she has to be placed from hand, but hey, it's nice the fact that she can call herself, get 2 13k boosters on the board, and or call this to get free soul charge and extra 5k boosters off of every single attack. 4 of Diantha. Very solid grade 1, pretty much makes the entire deck recyclable, combos really well with Lianorn, who combos really well with this, who is again your most important grade 1 by a long shot. 4 of Diantha, amazing grade 1. And then we have 4 copies of okay. If we don't count him, if we don't count Prosper over here, who by far is my favorite grade 1, then this is my favorite grade 1. So in terms of ranking, I'm not afraid to hide this. It goes Prosper, this thing, this thing, this thing, and then this thing. I'm not afraid to hide that. Anyways, Marching Debut Perete, grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, continues rear guard during your turn. If you have 3 or more grade 1 less rear guard, she gets with 5k power. Cool. 13k base. That's nice to have. You know, this one requires less than this one because it only requires 2 grade 1 or less back or rear guards. This one requires grade 1 or less rear guards in general. But I just like her. She looks cool. She has a rainbow in her background, which I am biased towards 100%. And she's also like the best one to call in the early game. Here's why. You have your starter, right? Or not your starter. You have Gracia, who when you ride Arcane upon it, you may call to rear guard circle. So you call Gracia. Then, that's 1. Then you call 1 Pirate. That's 2. Call literally anything else. And then boom, you have 3 grade 1 rear guards. And you don't have to waste a skill like Diantha's. So all around, Pirate is just my favorite because she's the best to call in the early game because, you know, her skill doesn't really require any other setup. She still gets numbers so she can hit grade 2 Vanguards. And the best part about it is she's not wasting another skill. So if your opponent retires something, you don't have to worry about having to get it back unless you really want that 13k booster. For Prete, probably like the best thing to early rush with this deck with, and I mean early rush in the sense of attacking without boosters, therefore Biara doesn't count because she wants to boost something. So just 4 of Prete. Like I said, she's cool, she can be called by effects, she has no cost in her skills, and she's very easy to make a 13k base out of. So for Prete, very solid grade 1. Then we have 4 copies of our PG and Custodial Dragon. Grade 1 boost, 0 sources, K base, continue sentinel. You may have it to 4 sentinels in deck and once put on guard circle. Choose one of your units. It cannot be hit till the battle. And if your hand is 2 or more cards, choose a card from your hand as guarded. Standard PG, nothing special about it. Basically, that means if this and only one other card is in your hand with placed on guard circle, you don't have discard one, which is great because that means you can discard stuff as you want in the early game, which again, this deck wants to do. And then you can just throw down the PG when your opponent counterattacks you. I remember one of my latest games with this deck. It wasn't the one against my friend, it was against someone else, but I got like 2 Parates on the board, 1 Diantha because I saw an opportunity, 1 Gracia, and 1 of Biara on the board while I was at grade 1. Let that sink in for a second. I went second, by the way. Let that sink in for a second. I went second and got 5 grade 1s out onto the board. Oh, wait, no, I went second. Okay, let me for a second, because I now remember I had Gracia on the board, so never mind. I had went second, and I had gone to grade 2, and I got the Gracia on the board. I had 5 rear guards before either of us got to grade 3. Let that sink in. And 2 of those rear guards came from the previous turn. Yeah, I pretty much, it's easy to say I won that game because I outrushed my opponent. Yeah, but the 4 of PGs kind of comes in handy when you drop 95% of your hand on the first turn of the game. 4 of Custodial Dragon. You can run Planet Prevent because they have the same skill, but I prefer Custodial Dragon because it came around this time of Lianorn. Then we have our last grade 1, one of in the ride deck, none in the main deck of Budding of Pleasant Sounds Gracia. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Auto when she's rode upon by Brilliant Turmeric Tina. This ability I didn't realize till they brought it up in the anime. You may call this card to rearguard circle. I'm not joking with you. Literally until it happened in the anime against Tomari, I never realized that that was a May clause But, I mean, to be fair, you're most of the time going to call this to board unless you're that conscious of your soul. But with this thing existing, you shouldn't really be that conscious of your soul. Because, again, it's a free call, and then her other abilities continues rear guard during the battle. She boosts to Vanguard. She gives 5k power. Downside is you're probably always going to call her to back center to best use the abilities of something like Prosper or Biara or literally anything else. That's a 13k booster. That's not specifically when it's boosting the Vanguard. But, hey, Gracia all around is a very solid grade 1. She adds numbers. And worst case scenario, if you're feeling really antsy and ballsy for attacks, you can just call her to front row to swing. I did that one of the first few games I played with Lianorn, and I didn't regret that decision because I pulled a bunch of triggers back to back, and Gracia just happened to be my only trigger target, and well, my opponent couldn't really keep up with Gracia's consistent swing of 18k. So one of Gracia in the ride deck. Most of the time you call it to back center. Some of the times you keep it in soul because you don't want to lose soul. And then the last time, which is a rare occurrence in a blue moon of itself, you call it to the front row and just see what bullshit you can pull with it. I tell you what, if it happens, it happens, and it's funny to watch this Gracia basically be a vanilla for the entire game, but be like the equivalent to a trigger sacker from Pokemon, you know how like, or like an HM slave pretty much, how you put all your HMs on like something like a Bidoof, and then you just swing with Gracia. That's pretty much what happens. The triggers are the HMs. Anyways, one of Gracia in the ride deck, none of the main deck. It's just a very solid grade 1. Then we have our only grade 2, one of in the ride deck, none in the main deck. There's literally no reason to run in the main deck, and that is Brilliant Tomb Rectina. Grade 2 and set 5k shield, 10k base. Auto when she's rolled upon by a unit of Lianorn, its card name. Soul Blast 1, choose a grade 1 less card from your drop zone, call it to rear guard. Cool, it can fetch a, grade 1 from the drop zone, so anything that you use as discard fodder is pretty much game. And then continues rear guard. If your back row has 3 more rear guards, including herself, she can get boost. So that's cool and all, grade 2 booster, that's 10k boost. However, we have 13k booster, 13k booster, 13k booster, something that can turn into a 13k booster and possibly 18k booster. Granted, only an 8k booster if it has on-hit pressure, and then possibly 18k booster. So, yeah, there's no reason to run this thing in the main deck. Like, it is possible to Soul Blast it out and call it via Diantha skill, but unless you literally have no other options, you are not calling this to rear guard. And by no other options, I mean your only other options are PGs, triggers, and grade 3s. And even then, you're probably going to call the grade 3s if you have access to back row. So, one of Rectina. Not a bad grade 2, but, like, you rarely only use it for the ride deck skill, and if you have to call it from drop zone, I consider your loss ratio already game, so one of them in the ride deck. Then we move on to our grade 3s, run 2 copies of an order I wanted to play for so long, but the deck space didn't work with it, and now that I play it, I have yet to see it fail, and it's so fun pulling it off. Happy Dreaming Festa. Grade 3 normal order, play it by counterblasting 1. If you have a Vanguard Lianorn its card name, look at the top 7 cards of your deck, shift to 2, grade 1 less unit cards from among them, call in the rear guard circle and shuffle your deck. As I have learned by shoving this thing against Gandiva, Eugene, and pretty much any deck that can nuke boards except for Prison, and even then Prison doesn't technically nuke boards, they take your board, but not counting Prison, like decks that actually nuke your boards, this deck can lose its entire board in 5 seconds and then regain it back out the wazoo within the next 5 seconds. That's what I've learned about this deck, and it does it consistently. And then it can do it again the following turn. Hell, if it has enough resource, it can do it a 3rd time. But either way, though, basically being able to just pay a simple CB1 to get 2 free rear guards is great, because I remember there was actually a game against the board nuker deck where I actually got to respawn my board 3 times, and the 3rd time I was running low on resources and, hand cards to make a back row with, and I play this and I flip over, I think it was a Pirete and this thing. I call them both to rear guard, and then I just call 2 triggers from my hand to front row because I already have something in the back center, and then I just swing with Vanguard, Soul Blast 1, drop my last hand card, boosted everything, see triple triggers. Yeah, no, it happened, and I won because they only had 1 PG. So, yeah. Either way, though, Festa, very solid grade 3 order. It makes a board, makes it so you can get to keep hand cards. It only costs 1 CB, and allows you to, consistently make back your rear guards if your opponent nukes them. 2 of Happy Dreaming Festa. Granted, it can technically lead to an endgame CB problem, but that's only if it gets to an endgame CB problem. And trust me, when you're consistently calling out rear guards out the wazoo, unless they're planning on going to a stall match with you, they ain't gonna survive to the endgame. 2 of Happy Dreaming Festa. Then we have 4 copies of Resonance Dragon. Grade 3, 29%, 13k base, continues rear guard circle. If your unit's boosted a total of 3 or more times this turn, it gets plus 5k power, 18k base. I'm really starting to think that the Evolved Lianorn's gonna, by some way, somehow boost with the entire board, even if they don't have boost. But either way, though, basically being an 18k booster when you just, swinger, when you just swing with Lianorn is all around pretty solid. And then auto rear guard, at the end of the battle, this unit attacked into a Vanguard. If you had a Vanguard of Lianorn's card name, and your unit's boosted a total of 5 or more times, by counterblasting 1, you can put this unit to soul and choose one of your rear guards and stand it. All around solid, so pretty much Lianorn is always going to be PG fodder because, somewhere in the high 50s or 60s or hell, even 80s at some point. So being able to you know, or force a PG out, and then when you see a crit, if you have this thing on your board, you give it to something else on your board, such as, I don't know, Pirate is typically what I have in the front row, and then, you know, you stand your back row, then you swing with Pirate with a boost, then you swing with Resonance Dragon with a boost, you use Resonance Dragon skill to send it to soul, stand the Pirate that now has a double crit, and then just keep swinging for double crit pressure. All around, Resonance Dragon is a very solid grade 3, adds crit pressure along with Lianorn's already crit pressure, because again, triple drive, high numbers, they're going to PG it. Now Pirate, assuming that you call Pirate, it doesn't really matter who it is, but you see a crit, you give it to that other rear guard, you swing with it, they has double crit, they have to block it, then you swing Resonance, they probably take Resonance if they can, and they send Resonance Soul, stand Pirate, or whatever it is, and then swing again with double crit. All around, very solid grade 3, force out pressure with criticals, force out more PGs, or just more guard power in general. And granted, he doesn't have like any forceful abilities himself, but it adds something forceful to another unit. So 4 Resonance Dragon, just very good grade 3. And then we have our last card on the deck, 3 of them in the main deck, 1 of them in the red deck of our main grade 3. Grand March of Full Bloom, Lianorn. Grade 3, Ginger Persona at 13k base. Act Vanguard Circle once per turn. By counterbossing 1, you get to draw a card, choose a card from hand, and call it to rear guard, discard it. Pretty much I always forget to use that ability, and it's kind of a good thing that I do because, again, this deck can get into like a late game CB problem. So, you know, I always have to fiddle with Resonance Dragon, Happy Dreaming Festival, and of course Diantha. Diantha and Resonance Dragon are always the priority, but you do want to make room for a Happy Dreaming Festa just in case. But, you know, you kind of have to be a little bit CB conscious, so it's a good that I consistently forget the skill. But if I don't, typically what you do is CB1, draw a card, call this, then use this thing skill to either call Resonance Dragon or this thing or literally any other targets I said earlier. So, all around, being able just to possibly call 2 cards is pretty nice, but also just get a free draw is also nice to have too, though you do have to call something to rear guard. And then Auto Vanguard, when this unit attacks into something, whether it's Vanguard or rear guard, though most of the time you're going to swing into a Vanguard. Soul Boss 1, ditch a hand card, and boost this unit with all your back row standing units with boost, and if you boost it with 3 or more units, it gets +1 drive to the battle. At the end of the battle, choose 2 of your back row rear guard and stand them. All around, pretty solid because, you know, you're typically going to boost with, let's just say, Gracia for 13k, Pirate for actually, it's probably going to be Diantha because in the back row for 13k, so, you know, 26, and then you boost with Prosper, who can possibly make himself, unless you have a Resonance Dragon on your board, it'll also be at 13, so, you know, a total of 39k. So on first grade 3 turn, the Vanguard swinging for 52 with no triggers behind it. Cool. And it has triple drive on top of that, and it can stand 2 of those rear guards. All around, though, Lianorn is very solid. She adds numbers out the wazoo. Her triple drive is insane. And not to mention the fact that she allows you to be able just to get a rear guard for simple cost of a CB. All around, Lianorn, very solid grade 3. I can't wait to see what the evolution does and hope it works really well with this one because I really like using this on first grade 3 turn, especially if you're going first. So, you know, if you have the ability to abuse it with another card, it'd be pretty nice as well. Also, keynote about Resonance Dragon over here that I just remembered. He doesn't require the opponent to be at grade 3. Meaning this deck can pull off its most bullshit moves while your opponent's at grade 2. Just saying that now. Either way, though, that's it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. All around, it's fun to play. It gets really big numbers on first grade 3 turn. Second grade 3 turn also gets really big numbers. Anytime you Persona, it gets big numbers. And if you see a crit, you're already putting pressure because, again, triple drive, forcing out a PG, and then you give it to a rear guard. But if you have Resonance Dragon on your board while you see a crit, oh, you're going to force out a lot of PGs. And not to mention the fact this deck has, because I've tested it before, can and will bring back its board after being Borg nuked at least 3 times. Okay, well, at least 2 times without having a problem. The 3rd time is where it starts having problems. So, I'm getting this one here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, join us on Twitch, and I'll see you all in this one. Don't stand up, your Vanguards.